Number 1 on the list of arson suspects is the emperor himself. Nero was supposedly seen playing his lyre at the top of a nearby tower as the fire raged.
He's said to have looked at the fire as though it were a spectacle, and to have gone to the Tower of Maecenas and recited the fall of Troy. The tradition is that Nero was fiddling while Rome burned.
His actions after the blaze were just as incriminating. Nero confiscated a third of the charred city as his own personal property and set out to build the empire's most extravagant monument to self-indulgence, a palace complex covering some 200 acres of downtown Rome.
The rumor starts to spread that he had set the fire intentionally so as to clear a portion of the city where he could build this palace.
Nero blamed the fire on a new religious cult called the Christians and had hundreds of them strung up and burned to death in the streets of Rome. This was just the latest in a string of horrifying acts that solidified Nero's dysfunctional legacy.
He served up the head of one of his ex-wives to his new wife as a present on her request, and then later kicked her to death when she was pregnant in a fit of rage. Most of the acts for which Nero is most infamous come after one of the most heinous acts one can commit, the killing of one's own mother.
Agrippina, who had orchestrated Nero's rise to power by killing her husband Claudius, was antiquity's most overbearing mother. She expected to share power equally with her son.
She wasn't going to accept a subservient role, not to Claudius, not to her son, and that, of course, did her in, ultimately.
Agrippina's thirst for control gradually infuriated Nero. In 59 AD, 5 years after he became emperor, the 21-year-old sent his guards to kill his own mother. As they closed in, Agrippina symbolically ordered the guards to stab her in the womb.
She said, "Strike here first." This bore Nero. Very dramatic.
Nero was haunted by visions of his mother's ghost for the rest of his life. Visions which pushed him further into madness.
Nero, as time goes on, becomes more and more lonely, and at the same time, perhaps also therefore more and more paranoid and more cruel.
It was in the midst of his deepening delusions that Nero began building the empire's most lavish pleasure palace on public land and with public money.
You'd have to imagine the whole of Central Park is transformed into Bill Gates' personal estate and pleasure palace. And this is in the heart of the city where the rich and the affluent and the people who have a part of the city itself once had their homes. It was shocking.
Nero bled the provinces dry to get money for that. And also in Rome, he demanded money from the rich. They had to bequeath him their money, and then they would be offed. It must have been a very scary time to be alive.
Nero's golden house was built on the pain and sweat of forced labor. In ancient Rome, slavery was a common and acceptable practice. 1 in every 3 people living in the city was a slave.
Rome's achievements would be unthinkable without slave labor. This slave labor was part of what generated the profits necessary to maintain and to expand an empire. There's no question that slave labor was also very significant for the building of these grand projects that really define the essence of imperial Rome.
Nero's new palace would reflect his godlike perception of himself. It was designed to evoke a sprawling seaside villa in the heart of the city. Vineyards, gardens, and pastures for wild animals would cover what had once been Rome's downtown crossroads. The center of the complex would be a man-made lake, and the pavilion with covered walkways a mile long. A vast 150-room wing of that pavilion still survives today, buried beneath modern Rome. Its cavernous interior demonstrates Roman mastery of another engineering innovation: the vaulted ceiling.
A vault is nothing more or less than an arch which has been extended along an axis. Once you've built that framing one time and built one arch, move the framing, build another, move the framing, build another, you have a long vault. Very efficient way to build for the Romans.
When the Domus Aurea was completed after just 4 years, Emperor Nero exclaimed, "Finally, I can begin to live in a house worthy of a human being." The surviving remnant is a dank shell of the decadent palace he inhabited. These brick and concrete chambers were once trimmed in gold and covered with colorful frescoes and priceless gems.
There were semi-precious and precious stones embedded in the ceiling, so that there's lapis lazuli and rock crystal and rose crystal that were just put up to catch the light.
And in building the Domus Aurea, Nero is showing that he is not, like good emperors, generous with his personal resources, and I think this is one of the things that leads to his downfall. His behavior was so far off the scale in terms of what senators and the people in Rome expected out of their emperor that I think he ultimately paid the price.
In 68 AD, just months after he moved into the Domus Aurea, Nero was overthrown by a tidal wave of opposition. He was declared a public enemy by the Senate and hunted like a fugitive by his own guards. As they closed in on him, Nero slit his throat with the help of a loyal slave. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me."
Nero died like the grandiloquent actor he always wanted to be, a kind of tragic actor upon a tragic stage. So his final words really do complete a picture of somebody who saw themselves not as an emperor, but as a star. After Nero's death, the Romans sought to bury any memory of him and his oppressive reign. By 104 AD, his golden house was filled in and covered with dirt and rubble. It would form the foundation of a bath complex built above it by the Emperor Trajan. For the next 1,300 years, it lay buried and forgotten beneath a changing city. Then in the 1500s, a sinkhole led explorers back into the belly of the ancient beast. Inside, Renaissance artists drew inspiration from its bizarre frescoes.
The very word grotesque that we use today is actually an artistic term to describe these strange creatures that they saw down there that were part human, part beast, part architecture, part decoration.
The Domus Aurea is an enduring testament to Nero's chilling reign, one marred by madness, mass murder, and extreme self-indulgence. When that reign ended, the Roman Empire faced an uncertain future. Every emperor from Julius Caesar through Nero had been a descendant of a single bloodline. Now, for the first time, rule of the empire was left up for grabs. No one was sure really what was going to happen next, except that it was going to be bloody and it wasn't going to be very good until it was over.